The morning sun streamed through the small window of Sophia Chen's bedroom, casting a golden glow over the worn piano books stacked neatly on her desk. At 17, Sophia's room looked different from those of her classmates. No band posters or sports trophies decorated her walls. Instead, handwritten music sheets were carefully pinned beside a single framed photo of Chopin. Sophia sat at the edge of her bed, dark circles under her eyes betraying another night spent practicing, until her parents gently knocked on her door, reminding her that neighbors might not appreciate Chopin at midnight. Her slender fingers, slightly calloused at the tips, unconsciously tapped out a rhythm on her knee as she stared at her phone. "This can't be real," she whispered. Reading the email for the 10th time, the prestigious Westbrook International Music Festival had invited her to perform. Her, Sophia Chen from Pine Creek, a town so small it barely appeared on maps, where the only venue she'd ever played was the community center with its out-of-tune upright piano. The sound of her mother's voice calling her for breakfast broke through her daze. Grabbing her phone, Sophia hurried to the kitchen where the familiar smell of her mother's congee filled the air. "Mom, Dad, look at this," she said, thrusting her phone toward them. "I got invited to the Westbrook Festival, but I don't understand. I never applied." Her father, still in his work uniform from the night shift at the factory, took the phone. His weathered hands, so different from Sophia's nimble ones, seemed too rough against the sleek device. His eyes widened as he read. This is big," he said, passing the phone to his wife. Her mother wiped her hands on her apron, the same one she'd worn for years, patched in several places. Her eyes moved slowly across the screen, her lips forming the words silently. English still didn't come as naturally to her as it did to Sophia. "Ms. Huang must have sent your recording," her mother finally said, referring to Sophia's piano teacher. "She always said you were special." "But the festival is for real musicians, professionals, and university students," Sophia protested, though a small flutter of excitement stirred in her chest. "And it's in Chicago. We can't afford—" "We'll find a way," her father interrupted, his voice firm despite the exhaustion etched on his face. "You've earned this chance." Sophia felt a lump form in her throat. Her parents had sacrificed so much already, her father working double shifts, her mother cleaning houses and giving Mandarin lessons, all to pay for her piano studies with Ms. Huang. For 6 years, they'd saved every extra penny for a proper piano, replacing the electronic keyboard she'd started on. "I should call Ms. Huang," Sophia said, reaching for her phone. An hour later, Sophia sat in Ms. Huang's modest living room, where the elderly teacher had transformed the space into a music studio. The grand piano, which took up most of the room, gleamed under the lights, a stark contrast to the simple furnishings surrounding it. "I know I should have asked your permission," Ms. Huang said, her accent still strong despite decades in America. "But you were ready, even if you don't believe it yourself. But why didn't you tell me?" Sophia asked, still trying to process the news. Ms. Huang adjusted her glasses, her eyes kind but determined. "Because you would have said no. Your playing is technically excellent, Sophia, but you hold back. You're afraid to let people hear you. The judges didn't see your face or know your age, they only heard your music. And they were impressed." Sophia ran her fingers over the piano keys without pressing them, feeling the smooth ivory beneath her fingertips. "What piece should I play if I accept?" "If?" Ms. Huang raised an eyebrow. "There is no if. This is your moment. As for the piece..." She walked to her shelf, fingers skimming over scores before pulling one out. "Chopin's Polonaise in A-flat major, opus number 53. Sophia's eyes widened. "The heroic Polonaise? That's beyond my level, is it?" Ms. Huang placed the music in front of her. "Or are you just afraid of it?" The truth was, Sophia had secretly practiced parts of the piece for months, drawn to its intensity, its technical challenges, and the story behind it. How Chopin had written it as a symbol of Polish resistance and national pride. But she'd never dared to play it for anyone, not even Ms. Huang. "You've been working on it already, haven't you?" Ms. Huang said with a knowing smile. "I can see it in your eyes. Play it for me now, just the beginning." Sophia's heart raced as she positioned her hands. The opening chords demanded confidence, a boldness she wasn't sure she possessed. She took a deep breath and began to play. The powerful octaves filled the room, her left hand creating the march-like rhythm while her right hand danced across the keys. She made it through the introduction before stumbling on the main theme, her fingers tangling as anxiety took over. "I'm sorry," she said. pulling her hands back. Don't apologize. You have 6 weeks to master it, Miss Huang said calmly. But the technical aspects aren't what concern me. You play every note correctly, but you're holding something back. Music isn't just about playing the right notes, it's about saying something through them. Later that evening, Sophia sat at the family's piano, a modest upright tucked into the corner of their small living room. Her grandmother, who lived with them, hobbled over with her cane and sat in the armchair nearby. Mom told me about the festival, grandmother said in Mandarin. I always knew my little Sophia would play for the world someday. Sophia smiled but didn't look up from the score. It's not the world, grandmother. Just a festival. Everything begins somewhere, grandmother replied. Your grandfather would have been so proud. Sophia's eyes drifted to the photograph on top of the piano, her grandfather seated at a piano much like this one, in their family home back in China. He had been a music professor before the Cultural Revolution changed everything, forcing him to abandon his career. He died before Sophia was born, but his love of music had somehow found its way to her. I'm scared, Sophia admitted quietly. What if I get on stage and freeze? What if I make a fool of myself? Grandmother reached out and patted her hand. Fear is natural, but ask yourself, what scares you more? Playing and making a mistake or never playing at all? The question lingered in Sophia's mind as she began to practice the Polonaise in earnest. Each day after school, she would rush home, quickly finish her homework, and then sit at the piano until her mother called her for dinner. After helping with dishes, she would return to the piano until bedtime. The heroic Polonaise was challenging in ways she hadn't anticipated. Beyond the technical difficulties, the rapid octaves, the complex left-hand patterns, the need for both power and delicacy, there was something about the piece that demanded emotional investment. It wasn't enough to play the notes. She needed to feel them, to understand the defiance and hope Chopin had woven into every measure. 2 weeks into her practice, disaster struck. While attempting a particularly difficult passage, Sophia felt a sharp pain shoot through her right wrist. She ignored it at first, pushing through the discomfort, but by the next morning her wrist was swollen and throbbing. You've strained it, the doctor said after examining her. You need to rest it completely for at least a week. Sophia fought back tears as the doctor wrapped her wrist in a brace. A week without playing might as well be a year. The festival was approaching and she was nowhere near ready. At home, she paced her room, fighting the urge to sit at the piano despite the pain. Her mother found her there, staring forlornly at the instrument. The doctor called, she said. You didn't tell us how serious it was. It's not serious, Sophia insisted. I just need a few days. Her mother sat on the bed, patting the space beside her. When Sophia joined her, she took her daughter's injured hand gently between her own. Your hands are precious, she said softly, not just because they play beautiful music, but because they're part of you. You must take care of them. But the festival will still be there when you're healed. Music has been in our family for generations. It can wait 1 more week. Forced to step away from the piano, Sophia found other ways to study the piece. She listened to recordings, noting the different interpretations. She read about Chopin and the historical context of the Polonaise. She even practiced the fingering silently on her desk, careful not to strain her wrist. By the time the doctor cleared her to play again, something had shifted. She sat at the piano with a new perspective, seeing the music not just as notes to be conquered, but as a story to be told. The day the official festival package arrived, containing her performance schedule and participant badge, reality hit home. In less than a month, she would be playing on the same stage where renowned pianists had performed. The thought made her stomach twist with anxiety. What if they laugh at me? She asked her father that night as he helped her adjust the bench height for practice. What if they wonder why someone like me is even there? Her father, a man of few words, was quiet for a moment. Then he said, When I first came to this country, people looked at me and decided what I was worth before I said a word. But I knew who I was. You know who you are, Sophia. You are music. With those simple words, Sophia felt something inside her strengthen. She placed her hands on the keys and began to play the opening of the heroic Polonaise once more. This time, instead of focusing on her fear, she thought about her family's journey. Her grandfather's lost dreams, her parents' sacrifices, and her own love for the piano that had sustained her through years of being the quiet girl no one quite understood. The music poured from her fingers with a new intensity, filling their modest home with something magnificent. Maybe, just maybe, she could do this after all. The calendar on Sophia's wall now had a big red circle around the festival date just 2 weeks away. Her practice had intensified, filling every spare moment of her day. She'd wake up before dawn to play quietly while her parents slept, squeeze in half an hour during lunch at school, and stay up long after everyone had gone to bed, her fingers dancing over the keys with a cloth dampening the piano's hammers. The heroic Polonaise was slowly becoming part of her. She'd mastered most of the technical challenges, though the famous octave section still sometimes tripped her up when fatigue set in. Ms. Huang had been pushing her harder than ever, drilling the difficult passages until Sophia could play them with her eyes closed. Better, Ms. Huang said after Sophia played through the piece one Tuesday afternoon. But you're still holding back in the middle section. This Polonaise isn't just beautiful, it's heroic, defiant. Chopin wrote it during a dark time for his homeland. You need to feel that struggle. Sophia nodded, though privately she wondered how she could channel emotions she'd never experienced. Her life had been sheltered, ordinary. What did she know about struggle and defiance? That evening, as Sophia helped prepare dinner, her grandmother shuffled into the kitchen, moving more slowly than usual. Are you okay, grandmother? Sophia asked, noticing how her grandmother leaned heavily on her cane. Just tired, grandmother replied with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I want to hear you play after dinner. The festival piece, Sophia beamed. Her grandmother was her most enthusiastic audience, often sitting beside the piano for hours, eyes closed, swaying gently to the music. After dinner, Sophia settled at the piano while her grandmother took her usual spot in the armchair. Her parents sat on the couch, her father fighting to keep his eyes open after his long shift. Taking a deep breath, Sophia began to play. She'd performed the piece for her family many times over the past weeks, but tonight felt different. She wanted to show them how far she'd come, how close she was to being ready. She was halfway through the piece, just entering the challenging octave section, when a strange sound made her fingers falter. Turning, she saw her grandmother's teacup shatter on the floor, her grandmother's face frozen in an odd expression, one side drooping strangely. Mom, her father called, suddenly alert. Grandmother tried to speak, but her words came out slurred and incomprehensible. Then, as if in slow motion, she slid from the chair. The next few hours passed in a blur. The ambulance, the harsh hospital lights, the doctors speaking in hushed, urgent tones. Stroke, they said. A serious one. Sophia sat in the uncomfortable hospital chair, still wearing the clothes she'd had on at the piano, her fingers now fidgeting uselessly in her lap. Her mother wept quietly beside her while her father spoke with the doctors in the hallway. She's stable, he said when he returned, his face haggard, but there's been significant damage. She'll need intensive care rehabilitation. It's too early to know how much function she'll recover. She'll get better, right? Sophia asked, her voice small. Her father's hesitation was answer enough. Days blurred together after that. Sophia's mother took family leave from her cleaning jobs, but they couldn't afford for her father to miss work. Sophia stepped up, spending every moment she wasn't in school at the hospital, helping the nurses turn her grandmother, feeding her when she could swallow, talking to her even though there was no clear sign she understood. At night, exhausted, Sophia would collapse into bed without touching the piano. The festival date loomed closer, but it seemed insignificant now, almost offensive in its triviality compared to her grandmother's fight for life. A week after the stroke, Ms. Huang came to visit. She brought soup and sat with Sophia in the hospital cafeteria, while her mother took a rare break to shower at home. You haven't been to lessons, Ms. Huang said gently. I understand why. Sophia stared into her soup untouched. I'm going to withdraw from the festival. Ms. Huang didn't seem surprised. Have you told your parents? Not yet, but they'll understand. It's just a performance. Grandmother is... Sophia's voice caught. Your grandmother loves your music, Ms. Huang said. I remember how proud she was at your first recital. Sophia smiled faintly at the memory. She'd been 8, playing a simple Mozart piece. She'd made a mistake in the middle but kept going. Afterward, her grandmother had hugged her so tightly, whispering in her ear, You played through the mistake. That's what matters. She would want you to play, Ms. Huang continued, but you must decide what feels right. That evening, Sophia entered her grandmother's hospital room to find a nurse adjusting the bed. Her grandmother's eyes were open, tracking the nurse's movements. "She's more alert today," the nurse said with an encouraging smile. "Talk to her. She might understand more than she can show." Sophia pulled a chair close to the bed and took her grandmother's hand, the one that still had some movement. "Hi, grandmother. I missed you today." No response, just a slight pressure from her fingers. Sophia talked about school, about the weather, about everything except the festival. But as visiting hours neared their end, she finally brought it up. "I don't think I can do the festival anymore," she said quietly. "I haven't practiced in days, and it doesn't seem important now." Her grandmother's hand twitched in hers. "I wish you could tell me what to do," Sophia continued. "Everyone else will say what they think I want to hear." An idea struck her. Pulling out her phone, she found a recording of the last time she'd practiced the Polonaise. She held the phone near her grandmother's ear and pressed play. The tinny sound of the piano filled the small hospital room. It wasn't a good recording, just something she'd made to analyze her own playing. But the essence of the piece came through. As the music played, Sophia watched her grandmother's face. At first, there was no reaction. But as the piece built to its passionate middle section, a tear slid down her grandmother's cheek. And when the famous octave passage began, her hand squeezed Sophia's with surprising strength. The message couldn't have been clearer if she'd spoken. The next day, Sophia brought her digital keyboard to the hospital. The staff, seeing her determination, helped her set up in a small waiting area where she wouldn't disturb other patients. For 2 hours, she practiced while her mother sat with grandmother. Her fingers felt stiff, and passages that had become familiar now seemed foreign. But she pushed through, thinking of her grandmother's squeeze. This became her new routine. School, hospital, brief practice, home to help with chores, sleep, repeat. The festival was now just a week away, and while Sophia no longer thought about withdrawing, she had no illusions about her readiness. "You're doing too much," her father said one night, finding her asleep at the piano, her head resting on her arms. "The festival, perhaps next year, would be better." "I need to do this," Sophia said, straightening up. "For grandmother." "Your grandmother would want you to take care of yourself," he countered. "I am. This is taking care of myself. I can't explain it, but I need to play this piece now more than ever." Her father studied her face, then nodded slowly. "Then we will make it happen." 3 days before the festival, Sophia received permission to play for her grandmother in her room. A nurse helped prop grandmother up, and Sophia wheeled in the keyboard. "I don't know if I'm ready," Sophia admitted, "but I want you to hear it, the whole piece, the way I play it now." She began to play, and immediately she could feel the difference. Her technique had suffered from the lack of practice. Notes that should have been crystal clear were slightly muddy. Transitions that should have been smooth had tiny hesitations. But something else had changed, too. As she played the opening theme, she thought of her grandmother's life story, how she'd lived through war and revolution in China, how she'd left everything behind to give her children a better life in America. When she reached the middle section, with its suggestion of hope amid struggle, she felt a lump form in her throat. And then came the famous octave passage, the part that had always given her trouble. But now, as her hands moved across the keys, she wasn't thinking about technique or tempo. She was thinking about her grandmother fighting to recover, about her parents working impossible hours, about her own journey with this piece. Her playing wasn't perfect, far from it. But for the first time, she understood what Ms. Huang had been trying to tell her. The music wasn't just notes on a page. It was a voice, a story, a connection. When she finished, she looked up to see tears streaming down her grandmother's face. And though half her face remained immobile from the stroke, the other half had formed an unmistakable smile. The day before the festival, Sophia had her final lesson with Ms. Huang. She played through the piece, making several technical errors but never losing the emotional thread. When she finished, Ms. Huang was quiet for a long moment. "You're not the same pianist you were a month ago," she finally said. "I know. I'm not as prepared as I should be," Sophia replied, looking down at her hands. "That's not what I meant. Your playing has changed. Before you were technically excellent but safe. Now," Ms. Huang searched for the right words, "now you play like someone who understands what this music is about. But the mistakes can be fixed with time. But what you found, that connection to the music, that's the real achievement." Some pianists practice for decades and never find it. As they finished the lesson, Ms. Huang handed Sophia a small gift bag. Inside was a new festival outfit, a simple but elegant black dress. "My grandmother's making progress," Sophia said, touched by the gift. "The doctors say her understanding is intact even if she can't speak yet. She's fighting so hard. And tomorrow you will play for her," Ms. Huang said, squeezing Sophia's shoulder. That night, Sophia couldn't sleep. She lay awake, fingers moving silently, playing the piece in her mind. Tomorrow she would step onto a stage unlike any she'd played before, in front of people who would expect excellence. But as dawn broke, Sophia realized something important. She wasn't playing for the judges or the audience. She wasn't even playing for herself anymore. She was playing for her grandmother, for the woman who had always believed in her, who was now fighting the hardest battle of her life. And somehow, that made all the difference. The morning of the festival arrived with golden sunlight streaming through Sophia's bedroom window. She'd finally fallen asleep just before dawn, and now her alarm jolted her awake. For a moment she lay still, the weight of the day ahead pressing down on her chest. Today was the day, the Westbrook International Music Festival, the heroic Polonaise, her first major performance. Her phone buzzed with a text from her father. "We need to leave in 1 hour." The original plan had been for both her parents to accompany her to Chicago, but with her grandmother in the hospital, they'd had to adjust. Her father would drive her to the festival while her mother stayed behind. It wasn't ideal, but nothing about the past 2 weeks had been. Sophia got up and went through her morning routine mechanically. Shower, breakfast. She could barely swallow the toast her father made, her stomach tight with nerves. "Did you sleep?" her father asked, noticing the dark circles under her eyes. "A little," she lied. He nodded, not pressing further. "I called the hospital this morning. Grandmother had a good night?" Sophia felt a small wave of relief. At least that was something. She packed her festival folder with the music score, though she knew the piece by heart now. As she zipped up her bag, her eyes fell on her grandmother's worn jade bracelet sitting on her desk. Her grandmother had pressed it into her hand during yesterday's hospital visit, her eyes communicating what her voice couldn't. Sophia slipped it onto her wrist. It was too big, sliding up and down her arm, but she didn't care. It felt right to have a piece of her grandmother with her today. The drive to Chicago took just over 2 hours, mostly in silence. Her father wasn't one for small talk, and Sophia was lost in her thoughts, mentally playing through the Polonaise again and again. Every now and then, her hands would move in her lap, fingering a particularly difficult passage. As they approached the city, tall buildings rising around them, Sophia's anxiety grew. What was she doing here? She was just a small-town girl who practiced on a second-hand upright. The other performers would be conservatory students, maybe even young professionals. "We're almost there," her father said, breaking into her thoughts. The Radford Center. The venue loomed ahead, a modern glass building with banners announcing the festival. Sophia's heart hammered against her ribs. "I can't do this," she whispered. Her father found a parking spot and turned off the engine. He turned to look at her, his expression serious. "When we first came to this country," he said slowly, "I couldn't speak the language. I had a PhD from China, but here I was nothing. I took the factory job because it was all I could get. Every day I thought, I can't do this. But every day, I did it anyway." Sophia had heard pieces of this story before, but never so directly. "You have your mother's talent and my stubbornness," he continued with a rare smile. "That's a powerful combination." Taking a deep breath, Sophia nodded and got out of the car. Inside the Radford Center, the atmosphere buzzed with nervous energy. Young musicians clutched instrument cases, paced hallways, or sat with scores open on their laps. Sophia followed the signs to registration, where she received her participant badge and a schedule. Her performance was set for 2:30 p.m. after lunch. Her father found them seats in a quiet corner of the lobby. "Should we listen to some other performances?" he asked. Sophia hesitated. Part of her wanted to hear the competition, but another part worried it would only increase her anxiety. Maybe just one, she decided. They slipped into the back of the performance hall, where a young man was playing a Liszt piece. His fingers flew over the keys with confidence, and the audience sat rapt. Sophia felt a knot form in her stomach. He was good, really good. As they left after his performance, she whispered to her father, He's going to win. This isn't about winning, her father reminded her. It's about playing your best. They found a practice room where Sophia could warm up. The piano was a beautiful grand, far superior to any she'd played before. She ran through scales first, getting a feel for the action of the keys, then played portions of the Polonaise. Her fingers felt stiff, not responding as they should. I need to use the restroom, she said abruptly, standing up. In the bathroom, she splashed cold water on her face, trying to calm her racing heart. Her reflection looked back at her, pale and frightened. She touched her grandmother's bracelet, sliding it up and down her wrist. I'm doing this for you, she whispered to her reflection. For grandmother, for dad, for mom, but was that true? Ms. Huang's words came back to her. Music isn't just about playing the right notes, it's about saying something through them. What was she trying to say with this piece? What did the heroic Polonaise mean to her? Before she could answer these questions, her phone buzzed. It was a text from her mother with a photo attached. Sophia opened it and gasped. It was her grandmother, awake in her hospital bed. She held a small whiteboard where someone, probably a nurse, had written for her, "Play with your heart, not your fear." Tears sprang to Sophia's eyes. Her grandmother had always seen right through her, always known exactly what she needed to hear. When she returned to the practice room, her father looked up. Better? She showed him the photo. He smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Your grandmother always did have a way with words. They ate a light lunch, though Sophia could barely taste the sandwich her father had packed. As the clock ticked closer to her performance time, the knot in her stomach grew tighter. At 2:15, a festival volunteer came to find her. Sophia Chen, you're on in 15 minutes. We need you backstage. Sophia froze, suddenly unable to move. Her father squeezed her shoulder gently. I'll be right there in the audience, he promised. Front row. Backstage was dimly lit and surprisingly quiet. Other performers nodded to her as she found her place in line. Through a gap in the curtains, she could see the audience. Rows and rows of people, including many who looked like professional musicians. Critics, perhaps, teachers. People who would know every mistake she made. The performer before her, a violinist, finished to enthusiastic applause. As he exited the stage, he gave Sophia an encouraging smile. All yours, he whispered. The announcer's voice boomed through the hall. Our next performer is Sophia Chen, playing Chopin's Polonaise in A-flat major, Opern 53, Heroic. Sophia's legs felt like lead as she walked onto the stage. The spotlight was blinding, making it difficult to see the audience. Though she could just make out her father's face in the front row, as promised, the grand piano waiting for her was enormous, its polished surface reflecting the stage lights. She sat on the bench, adjusting its height slightly. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure the microphones would pick it up. She placed her hands on the keys and a hush fell over the audience. This was it. No turning back, but her fingers wouldn't move. They hovered over the keys, frozen with fear. 5 seconds passed. 10. She could feel the audience's growing discomfort, could almost hear their thoughts. This poor girl, she's not ready. Her eyes fell on her grandmother's bracelet sliding down her wrist. Play with your heart, not your fear. Closing her eyes, Sophia took a deep breath and began to play. The opening chords of the Polonaise filled the hall, strong and bold. She had played these notes hundreds of times, but never like this. Never with an audience hanging on every sound. She forced herself to focus only on the music, on the story she wanted to tell. As she moved into the main theme, she thought about her grandmother's journey, leaving China during difficult times, starting over in a new country, facing challenge after challenge with quiet strength. The music began to flow more naturally as she connected it to something real, something personal. But as she approached the middle section, doubt crept in again. She fumbled a passage, her fingers slipping on the keys. A wrong note rang out, jarringly obvious. Heat rushed to her face. In practice, she would have stopped, gone back, fixed it. Here she could only push forward. Remember why you're playing, she told herself. Not for perfection, for connection. She thought of her parents' sacrifices. Her father working night shifts, her mother cleaning other people's homes, both of them giving up dreams of their own to give her this chance. She thought of Ms. Huang's belief in her, sending that recording to the festival without telling her. And as she reached the famous octave passage, the part that had given her so much trouble in practice, something unexpected happened. Instead of tightening with anxiety, her hands relaxed. The technical challenges that had seemed so impossible now felt like a way to express something deeper than notes. Her left hand created a steady pulse while her right hand flew across the keys in rapid octaves, building the tension as Chopin had intended. She wasn't just playing the notes anymore. She was telling a story of courage, of facing impossible odds, of finding beauty in struggle. As she moved into the final section, returning to the main theme with renewed energy, Sophia felt something shift inside her. For the first time, she wasn't worried about making mistakes. She wasn't concerned with what the judges might think. She was simply sharing something that mattered to her, using Chopin's voice blended with her own. The final chords resonated through the hall. And then silence. For a moment, Sophia sat motionless, hardly believing she had made it through. Then the applause began. She stood slightly dizzy and bowed as she had been taught. The applause continued, stronger than she had expected. Through the spotlight, she could just make out her father in the front row standing, his usual reserve broken by a wide smile. As she walked off stage, legs shaking, the violinist who had played before her was waiting in the wings. "That was beautiful," he said simply. Sophia couldn't speak, overwhelmed by what had just happened. She had done it. Not perfectly, not flawlessly, but she had played with her whole heart. Her father met her in the lobby, wrapping her in a rare hug. "Your grandmother would be so proud," he whispered. "I made mistakes," Sophia said, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "Everyone makes mistakes. But not everyone plays with soul. You did." As they walked toward the exit, a middle-aged woman approached them. "Excuse me, are you Sophia Chen?" Sophia nodded, suddenly shy again. "I'm Professor Lin from the Chicago Academy of Music. Your interpretation of the Polonaise was unusual, but very moving. Do you have formal training?" "Just my local teacher, Ms. Huang," Sophia replied. Professor Lin handed her a card.
"Have her call me."
"I'd like to discuss your future." Sophia's father thanked the professor as she walked away. When she was out of earshot, he turned to Sophia with raised eyebrows. "The Chicago Academy?" But Sophia wasn't thinking about music schools or future opportunities. She was thinking about her grandmother, lying in a hospital bed fighting her own battle. "Can we go home now? I want to tell grandmother all about it." Her father nodded, understanding as always. As they walked to the car, Sophia felt lighter than she had in weeks. Whatever came next, awards or not, music school or not, she had discovered something important today. Music wasn't about being perfect. It was about being honest, and for the first time she had truly played from her heart. The journey home from Chicago seemed much shorter than the trip there. Sophia sat in the passenger seat, her festival folder clutched to her chest, replaying every moment of her performance in her mind. The mistakes she'd made stood out sharply. The fumbled passage in the middle section, a rushed transition, the slight hesitation before the octave run. But for once, these errors didn't consume her. "Do you think anyone was recording?" she asked her father, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "Probably. Most performances had people with phones out even though they weren't supposed to," he replied, keeping his eyes on the road. "Why? Worried about your mistakes being captured?" Sophia shook her head. "No, I just wish grandmother could have heard it." Her father smiled. "We'll tell her everything, and maybe someone will share their recording with us." It was nearly evening when they arrived at the hospital. Despite the long day and the emotional drain of the performance, Sophia insisted on visiting her grandmother immediately. Her mother met them in the hallway outside the room, her face lighting up when she saw them. "How did it go?" she asked, hugging Sophia tightly. "She was brave," her father answered before Sophia could speak. "Very brave." Inside the room, grandmother was awake, her eyes alert. The right side of her face remained motionless, but the left side formed a smile when she saw Sophia. On her lap was the whiteboard, ready for communication. Sophia sat on the edge of the bed and took her grandmother's good hand. "I played the whole piece," she said. "I made some mistakes, but I kept going." Her grandmother squeezed her hand. "There was a professor there from a music academy in Chicago," Sophia continued. "She wants to talk to Ms. Huang about me." Her grandmother's eyes widened. With effort, she pulled her hand away and picked up the marker beside her whiteboard. Her writing was shaky but legible. How did it feel? The question caught Sophia off guard. Not did you win, or what did the judges say, but how did it feel? It felt, Sophia searched for the right words. It felt like I was finally speaking, not just making sounds. Like the music was saying things I've never been able to say out loud. Her grandmother nodded, understanding perfectly. She wrote again, "That's what makes it art." Later that evening, after leaving the hospital, Sophia finally checked her phone properly for the first time since the performance. There were dozens of messages from friends and classmates who knew about the festival, and one from Ms. Huang. "Call me when you can." Professor Lin reached out. Sophia's stomach fluttered with nervous excitement. The Chicago Academy of Music was prestigious, far beyond what she'd ever imagined for herself. But as she scrolled through her messages, another name caught her eye. Li Wei, a boy from her calculus class. "Someone posted a video of your performance online," his message read. "It's getting a lot of views." Confused, Sophia clicked the link he'd sent. It led to a video sharing platform where, sure enough, there was a recording of her playing the heroic Polonaise. The video quality wasn't great, clearly taken from somewhere in the audience with a phone, but the sound was surprisingly good. The view count showed over 2,000 views already, which seemed impossible. Who would want to watch her play? The caption beneath the video read, "Unknown teenage pianist plays Chopin with her soul while grandmother fights for life." Sophia felt a wave of embarrassment. She hadn't told many people about her grandmother's stroke, certainly not anyone at the festival. How had this story gotten attached to her performance? She scrolled down to the comments, heart pounding. The way she hesitates at the beginning, then finds her courage. Beautiful. "I'm a piano teacher and I'm in tears. This isn't technically perfect, but it's more moving than many professional recordings. Does anyone know who she is? My daughter is learning piano and I want to show her this as inspiration." There were dozens more comments, most of them positive, many asking for more information about her. Sophia closed the app, overwhelmed. This wasn't what she had expected at all. She called Ms. Huang, who answered on the first ring. "I've been waiting to hear from you," her teacher said warmly. "How do you feel about your performance?" "I'm not sure," Sophia admitted. "But there's a video online and people are watching it and I don't understand why." Ms. Huang chuckled. "Because you played with your heart, not just your fingers. That's rarer than you might think." Now about Professor Lin, she was quite impressed. "She's offered you an audition for their youth program. It would mean weekly trips to Chicago for lessons, but—" "I can't leave grandmother," Sophia interrupted. "Not now. The audition isn't for another month. Let's see how things are then. Your grandmother would want you to consider it." After they hung up, Sophia sat on her bed, thoughts swirling. The festival, the video, Professor Lin's offer, it was all too much to process. She opened her laptop and, almost without thinking, searched for her own video again. The view count had climbed to nearly 3,000 now. As she watched herself play, she tried to see what others were seeing. The girl on the screen looked small under the bright stage lights, her dark hair falling forward slightly as she bent over the keys. There was a moment of stillness before she began, a visible breath, and then her hands moved. Watching herself felt strange, but it also allowed Sophia to hear her performance with fresh ears. Yes, there were technical flaws, but there was also something else, something she couldn't quite name. A quality in the music that hadn't been there during her practice sessions. Her phone buzzed with a text from her father. "Your mother is staying overnight at the hospital. I'm picking up dinner. Home soon?" Sophia closed her laptop and went to help set the table. Her life hadn't changed, not really. Her grandmother was still ill. Her parents still worked too hard. She still had homework to finish for tomorrow. And yet something had shifted inside her. The next morning at school felt surreal. Sophia moved through the hallways in a daze, still mentally and emotionally exhausted from the weekend. In calculus, Li Wei gave her a thumbs up from across the room, but thankfully didn't mention the video publicly. After class, however, he caught up with her in the hallway. "Hey, you're getting famous," he said with a grin. "The video has over 10,000 views now." Sophia shook her head, embarrassed. "I don't understand why. It wasn't even that good." "Are you kidding? It was amazing. My mom's a classical music fan and she cried when she watched it." Before Sophia could respond, her phone rang. It was her mother. "Sophia," she said, her voice filled with an excitement Sophia hadn't heard in weeks. "The doctors say grandmother is making excellent progress. She said her first word today." "Really, what did she say?" "She said proud. We were showing her the video of your performance. Everyone at the hospital has seen it now. Tears sprang to Sophia's eyes. I'll come right after school. There's more news, her mother continued. A reporter from the local paper called. They want to interview you about the performance and the video. It seems someone shared the story about grandmother's stroke and people are connecting with it. Sophia felt a flash of anxiety. I don't want to exploit grandmother's condition for attention. Of course not. But your music is bringing joy to people, including grandmother. Isn't that what art is supposed to do? The rest of the school day passed in a blur. Sophia found herself both looking forward to and dreading the hospital visit. The idea that her performance was somehow becoming public, becoming something separate from her, was unsettling. When she arrived at the hospital, she was surprised to see Ms. Huang sitting with her grandmother, both of them watching something on Ms. Huang's tablet. They looked up as she entered and Ms. Huang beckoned her over. We've been reading the comments on your video, Ms. Huang said. Some of them are from professional musicians. Look at this one. She pointed to a comment from someone claiming to be a Juilliard professor. This young woman understands what many technically proficient students miss, that music is primarily about communication, not perfection. I'd take this kind of playing over flawless but soulless technique any day. Sophia's grandmother reached for her whiteboard and wrote slowly, I always knew. Sophia felt tears well up again. Knew what, grandmother? That you had this gift. The writing was shaky but determined, not just playing notes, making people feel. A nurse came in, smiling when she saw Sophia. You're the pianist. We've all been watching your video. Your grandmother's been making great progress since yesterday. The speech therapist thinks hearing your music might have stimulated something. Really? Sophia asked, hardly daring to believe it. Music therapy is powerful, the nurse said, especially when there's an emotional connection. That evening, Sophia sat at her piano at home for the first time since the festival. Her fingers hovered over the keys, suddenly unsure. The heroic Polonaise had been her focus for so long, but now that the performance was over, what should she play? Almost without conscious decision, her hands began to move, playing the opening notes of the Polonaise again. But this time was different. She wasn't practicing for a performance or trying to perfect each phrase. She was simply playing, letting the music flow through her. As she played, she thought about everything that had happened, her unexpected invitation to the festival, her grandmother's stroke, the performance itself, and now this strange new attention. None of it had gone according to plan. All of it had changed her. When she reached the octave passage, the section that had given her so much trouble during practice, her hands moved with a new confidence. The notes weren't just technical challenges to be conquered, but expressions of something larger than herself. She didn't hear her father come in until he spoke from the doorway. It sounds different, he said quietly. Sophia's hands stilled on the keys. Different how? He seemed to search for the right words. Before, you played like someone trying very hard to get everything right. Now you play like someone who has something to say. He came into the room and sat beside her on the bench, something he rarely did. The video has over 50,000 views now. Someone from a national music blog called while you were at the hospital. Sophia shook her head, still unable to comprehend why her imperfect performance was resonating with so many people. Your mother and I have been talking, her father continued, about Professor Lin's offer, about what might come next for you. I can't leave grandmother, Sophia said immediately. No one is asking you to. But grandmother is making progress, and she would never forgive us if we let you miss an opportunity because of her. He placed his hand over hers on the keys. When I was young in China, I wanted to be a writer. My parents said it wasn't practical. They were right, of course, especially in those days. But sometimes I wonder, it was the most personal thing her father had ever shared with her. Sophia turned her hand to squeeze his. What would you have written about? A small smile crossed his face. Life. Family. The beauty in small moments. He shook his head. But that's the past. You have a gift, Sophia. Not just for playing notes correctly, but for making people feel something when you play. That's rare. I'm still figuring it out, she said. How to say what I want to say through the music. That's a lifetime's work, he replied. But you've made a good start. As he left the room, Sophia turned back to the piano. For the first time, she didn't see it as a challenge to be conquered or a skill to be mastered, but as a voice. Her voice. And she was just beginning to discover what she wanted to say. 1 week after the festival, Sophia's life had taken on a rhythm she never could have predicted. School, hospital visits, practice, and now interviews. The local newspaper had published a feature about her, complete with a photo of her at the piano. A classical music blog had done a phone interview, asking questions about her interpretation of the heroic Polonaise that she struggled to answer. "I didn't really have a special interpretation," she had told them honestly. "I was just trying to play what I felt." That quote, to her embarrassment, had become the headline. "Teen pianist, I was just playing what I felt." The video views had climbed to over 200,000. Comments poured in from around the world, many in languages Sophia couldn't read. Someone had added subtitles, explaining her grandmother's stroke and how Sophia had played despite barely practicing in the final weeks. "This isn't entirely accurate," she had told Ms. Huang during their lesson. "They're making it sound more dramatic than it was." Ms. Huang had smiled knowingly. "People connect with stories, not just music. They're touched by your dedication to your grandmother, by the emotion in your playing. Is any of that untrue? No, but then let them be moved by it. Art is about connection, Sophia. You're connecting." Now, sitting beside her grandmother's hospital bed, Sophia scrolled through new comments on her phone. Her grandmother was doing remarkably well, speaking short sentences, moving her left arm freely and beginning to regain some function in her right side. The doctors called her progress exceptional. "More fans?" her grandmother asked, her speech still slow but increasingly clear. Sophia smiled. "They're not really fans, grandmother. Just people who happened to see the video." "Show me." Sophia handed over her phone, open to a comment that read, "My daughter has been resistant to practicing piano. I showed her this video and she hasn't stopped playing since. Thank you for the inspiration." Her grandmother read it slowly, then looked up with a proud smile. "You help people. With your music." The idea still felt strange to Sophia. Her playing had always been a private thing, something she did for herself, for her family, for Ms. Huang. The thought that strangers were finding meaning in it was both flattering and frightening. "Professor Lin called again," Sophia said, changing the subject. "The audition is in 3 weeks. She says they might be able to offer a scholarship." "You'll go," her grandmother said firmly. "I don't know. It would mean a lot of time in Chicago. Away from home. Away from you." Her grandmother's face grew serious. "Listen to me," she said, each word carefully formed. "When I was young in China, I loved to draw. I was good, very good. My teacher wanted me to apply to art school in Beijing." This was news to Sophia. "You never told me you were an artist." "The Cultural Revolution came. Art became dangerous. I put away my brushes. Never took them out again." Her grandmother paused, gathering strength. "Don't put away your music, Sophia." "Not for me. Not for anyone." Sophia felt tears welling up. "I won't," she promised. That evening, she received an email that made her heart skip a beat. It was from a name she recognized instantly, Anton Lebedev, one of the world's most renowned pianists. His recordings of Chopin were considered definitive by many critics. "Dear Ms. Chen," the email began, "a colleague shared your festival performance with me, and I was deeply moved by your playing. While there are technical aspects that would benefit from refinement, you possess something far rarer, the ability to speak through the music. I will be giving master classes at the Chicago Academy next month. If you are interested in participating, please contact Professor Lin, who tells me you are considering their program. Musical gifts like yours should be nurtured with care." Sophia read the email 3 times, convinced it must be fake. Anton Lebedev had watched her play, had taken the time to write to her. It seemed impossible. She forwarded the email to Ms. Huang, who called her immediately. "This is extraordinary," Ms. Huang said, her voice vibrating with excitement. "Lebedev almost never takes an interest in young pianists, especially not those without conservatory training. You must accept. But what if it's not real?" Sophia asked, still disbelieving. "I've already spoken to Professor Lin. It's genuine. Lebedev saw your video and asked about you." Sophia sat on her bed trying to process this information. "Everything's happening so fast," she said. "A month ago, no one knew who I was. I didn't even want to play in the festival." "Life changes quickly sometimes," Ms. Huang replied gently. "The question is, what do you want, Sophia? Not what your parents want, or what I want, or what your grandmother wants. What do you want?" It was a question Sophia had rarely asked herself. She'd been playing piano since she was tiny, following the path laid out by her parents and Ms. Huang. She'd worked hard, practiced diligently. But had she ever really chosen this for herself? "I need to think," she said. After hanging up, Sophia went to the living room where her piano stood waiting. She didn't play, just sat on the bench running her fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them down. What did she want? The sound of the front door opening announced her parents' return. They came into the living room together, her father still in his work clothes, her mother carrying bags of groceries. "You got the email?" her mother asked immediately. News traveled fast between Ms. Huang and her parents. Sophia nodded. "Did you know grandmother used to be an artist?" "In China?" Her parents exchanged a look. "She showed us some of her sketches once," her father said. "She was very talented. She told me she gave it up during the Cultural Revolution, that she never drew again." Sophia looked up at her parents. "Isn't that sad? To have a gift and never use it?" Her mother set down the grocery bags and came to sit beside Sophia on the piano bench. "Your grandmother made choices based on the world she lived in. Our world, your world, is different. She wants me to audition for the Chicago Academy." "We all want that," her father said, his voice gentle. "But it must be your choice." The next day at school, Sophia found it hard to concentrate. The email from Lebedev kept playing in her mind, along with her grandmother's story about giving up art. During lunch, she sat alone trying to sort through her thoughts. "Hey, piano girl." She looked up to see Li Wei standing by her table, lunch tray in hand. "Mind if I sit?" She shrugged and he slid into the seat across from her. "You look stressed," he said, unwrapping his sandwich. "Just thinking. About the music academy thing?" "People are talking about it," Sophia frowned. "How does everyone know my business?" Li Wei laughed. "Small town, remember? Plus you're kind of famous now. My cousin in California saw your video." Sophia poked at her lunch without interest. "It's weird. All this attention for one performance that wasn't even that good technically." "Maybe people don't care about technically good as much as you think," Li Wei said thoughtfully. "My mom always says the best music makes you feel something. Your playing definitely does that." "But is that enough?" Sophia asked. "To build a future on, I mean." Li Wei considered this. "I don't know, but I think it's a pretty good place to start." His simple perspective stayed with Sophia throughout the afternoon. Was it enough? She'd spent years focusing on technical perfection, on playing every note exactly right. But the performance that had touched people, that had drawn the attention of someone like Lebedev, had been far from perfect. After school, she went straight to the hospital. Her grandmother was sitting up in a chair today, working with a physical therapist on hand exercises. "Look," her grandmother said with pride, slowly opening and closing her right hand. The movements were small but significant. "That's amazing," Sophia said, genuinely impressed. "Small steps." The therapist agreed. "But she's making remarkable progress." When they were alone, Sophia showed her grandmother the email from Lebedev. Her grandmother read it slowly, her eyes widening. "This is important," she said when she finished. "Very important, I know, but I'm not sure if I'm ready for everything that comes with it. The pressure, the expectations." Her grandmother reached for her whiteboard, still easier than speaking at length, and wrote, "Pressure comes from inside, not outside." Sophia thought about this. "You think my doubts are just fear?" Her grandmother wrote again, "Fear is normal. Letting it stop you is a choice." That evening, Sophia finally replied to Lebedev's email, thanking him for his interest and accepting his invitation to the master class. She also wrote to Professor Lin, confirming that she would audition for the academy program. As soon as she sent the emails, a weight seemed to lift from her shoulders. Whatever happened next, whether she was accepted to the program or not, whether she impressed Lebedev or not, she had made a choice. Her choice. The following weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Sophia worked with Ms. Huang every day, polishing the pieces for her audition. Her grandmother came home from the hospital, continuing her recovery in the comfort of familiar surroundings. The video views climbed to 500,000, then 700,000. A local TV station did a short feature on Sophia, filming her playing at home and visiting her grandmother. The reporter asked what she hoped would come from all the attention. "I just want to keep learning," Sophia had answered honestly. "And maybe help people see that music isn't about being perfect. It's about saying something that matters." The day before the audition, a package arrived from China. It was addressed to Sophia in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a beautiful hand-painted bookmark showing a piano with lilies growing from it. The note, written in Chinese, read, "From your grandfather's sister. We saw you on the internet." He would have been so proud. Sophia hadn't even known she had a great-aunt in China. Her grandmother explained that they had lost touch decades ago, after her grandfather left China. Somehow the video had bridged that gap across time and distance. The day of the audition dawned clear and cool. Sophia's parents had both taken rare days off work to drive her to Chicago. Her grandmother insisted on coming too, though she still tired easily. "Family supports family," she said firmly when Sophia worried the trip would be too much for her. The Chicago Academy of Music was housed in a beautiful old building downtown. As they walked through its ornate doors, Sophia felt a flutter of nerves. Professor Lin met them in the lobby, her smile warm and welcoming. "We're so pleased you decided to audition, Sophia," she said. "Your video has been quite the topic of conversation among our faculty." Sophia managed to smile. "Thank you for the opportunity. There's someone else who's looking forward to meeting you," Professor Lin added. "Anton Lebedev arrived early for his master classes. He's asked to observe your audition if you're comfortable with that." Sophia's heart nearly stopped. "Mr. Lebedev is here now?" Professor Lin nodded. "No pressure, of course. You can say no." Sophia looked at her family, her father standing tall and supportive, her mother with encouraging eyes, her grandmother with her knowing smile. She thought about how far they had all come to be here. Not just the drive from Pine Creek, but the journey across continents and generations. "It's fine," she said, surprising herself with her calm. "He can listen." As she followed Professor Lin to the audition room, Sophia realized something important. 6 weeks ago, the thought of playing for someone like Lebedev would have terrified her into silence. Now it felt like an opportunity, not just to be heard, but to say something meaningful through her music. The audition room was smaller than she expected, with a beautiful grand piano at its center. A panel of 3 professors sat at a table, and in the back corner, slightly apart, sat a distinguished-looking man with silver hair. "Anton Lebedev," he nodded to her slightly as she entered. "Whenever you're ready, Sophia," Professor Lin said, taking her place with the other judges. Sophia sat at the piano, adjusting the bench. She could feel Lebedev's eyes on her, could sense the judges waiting, but instead of freezing her, the awareness centered her. She placed her hands on the keys and began to play, not the Chopin that had brought her here, but a Bach prelude, clear, structured, mathematical. She played it cleanly, with precision, showing that she could handle the technical demands of classical repertoire. Then, without pausing for the judge's reaction, she transitioned into her second piece, Chopin's Nocturne in C minor. Unlike the Polonaise, this was a quieter, more intimate piece. As she played, Sophia thought about her grandmother's art, abandoned but not forgotten. She thought about her grandfather, who had passed his love of music through generations. She thought about her parents' sacrifices, but mostly, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. The fears she had faced, the discoveries she had made, and the voice she was still finding, note by note. When she finished, there was a moment of silence. Then Lebedev stood and walked to the piano. "You play from somewhere deep," he said, his accent thick but his words clear. "This cannot be taught. It can only be nurtured." He turned to the judges. "This young woman has something to say. We should listen." As Sophia left the audition room to rejoin her family, she felt strangely calm. Whatever happened next, whether she was accepted to the academy or not, whether her video reached 1 million views or was forgotten tomorrow, she had found something valuable, her own voice, and she was just beginning to discover what she wanted to say with it.